I am Mudita, and welcome back to Satisfactory. Today, I am finally going to save all the kittens and puppies. As you can tell, it's a long one. I have been working towards this last project for the last few hundred hours. When I automated superposition oscillators, alien power matrices, and the AI expansion servers, I was able to make more dark matter crystals than I needed, and I can finally use them all now. To make 40 ballistic warp drives per minute, I'll be making 20 and using the good old Somersloops to double the final step. This still requires a healthy amount of materials. Recently, I've made factories to increase production for plastic, rubber, copper sheets, deuterium ingots, and aluminum. I'm now in a good spot to build this final monstrosity, and for the first time since Satisfactory's official 1.0 release, beat the game. We are back in the Grassy Fields. Out of all the biomes, this is the least touched so far, and something just feels right about putting this final factory in the biome where it feels like we all start. Because of the way I've gone about the endgame here, I've got a lot of things already taken care of. So even though the Grassy Fields doesn't have the greatest quality of nodes, I don't need that many raw resources. I am going to be bringing in a ton of things by train. So it feels like that's where I should probably start. The train station here is definitely going to need to get bigger. I don't see it getting so big that it would interfere where I want to put the factory. Factory is probably going to go on the other side of the train tracks. And I'm really hoping I don't have to extend the train station that long. But because I haven't really measured this out and I don't know exactly how many train stations I need, we're kind of playing it by ear. And I want to make sure I have enough room. So let's just knock this out. First up, plastic and rubber. I think I've actually colored one too many plastic. I think we're gonna have to do 3 rubber and 1 plastic because in total I need 630 plastic and 2,127 rubber. So now I just need to set up a whole bunch of unload balancers. Without even trying, this video is going to be very long because in total I think it encompasses more than 65 hours of game time. And so in the interest of time, we're going to skip ahead through quite a few of these parts. I'll still try to highlight as much as I can, but there's quite a few things like the unload balancers, even though each one is usually a little bit different. The concept and how I build them is the same as, well, the last few dozen videos. And I will go through more of the load balancing in the factories, but some of this, I'll put up the diagrams and we're just going to gloss through them. And, like always, these diagrams are available for free on my Google Drive. So here we have the first 3 are identical. I need 853 rubber on each one of these freight cars. Even though this one is really long, it's really not too bad. Since I need 853, that needs a Mark 6 belt, but I can immediately split that into thirds. So I've got 400, 400, and 400. Now I've got a belt of 800, and then the rest of this is splitting that last 400 into 53, and the 347 that gets looped back to the storage container. So we've got 3 of those, and then for the rubber, this is how I got 654. So since that fits on a Mark 5 belt, that's where we start. 780 isn't really the best number to work with, and so usually I will end up looping back 20 so that I can work with 800. So there we've got a belt of 800, and we do the rest of the load balancing. All 4 of them will come out of here, and for now, we're just going to have a whole row of sinks to make sure that all of these trains can get up and running, and I'm not having any issues with the throughput. Getting this done early lets the trains run for hours, and then that way I can make sure that there are no issues with throughput and traffic and all that sort of a thing. We're going to jump through this, so let me show you what the West Coast looks like getting all this loaded. This was the first time I decided to just make all of the plastic and rubber in one location, and I was a little worried about how the train station would hold up. But so far, I haven't seen any issues. And this has worked really, really well. Now, I just need one last train station. So I went ahead and added that on. And I think I just said I needed like 2,100 rubber. But in fact, I actually need 2,559. Break it down over 3 freight cars, that's 853. But luckily enough for me, rubber and plastic stacked to 200, so 853 is really only 4¼ stacks per minute, meaning the train needs to complete its round trip in about 7.5 minutes. but just going from here to the Grassy Fields isn't too far. I think I had hinted at it in the last video. I did need to make one last adjustment. In the last video, I made that plastic and rubber tower, which I am still just super happy with the way those blueprints turned out, because I was able to switch just entire floors from making plastic to rubber or vice versa. So it made it really easy to correct my mistake. So now I've got an 800 belt, an 800 belt, and then this last belt has 600 plastic and 400 rubber. That comes into a smart splitter. The 600 plastic goes into this merger, and the 400 rubber goes into this merger. So I still have a little bit of load balancing left to do for these. All three of these need 853, but the plastic is all done. So I've got 600, I just needed 54. So if we follow this belt all the way up to the front, this load balancer was actually already here. So I took the easy route. This 174 is what I had left over, and it was all going to the sink. Since I need 54, it was just too easy to put a smart splitter here. I make this and this Mark III to make up for any of the gaps that are here on the belt. But up above here, we have this stretch limited down to Mark II. So I'm only going to be sinking 120, and the other remaining 54 as the overflow will continue to go that way. Let me take care of the last bit of load balancing for the rubber. Since this is the last train I'm going to have coming out of here, I can now add the final wall. The West Coast is finally done. I ended up with 9 different train stations here. The very first one started as my personal train, but eventually once I unlocked the teleporter, then I was able to just repurpose it because I was just never going to use it. I have a grand total of 441 plastic and rubber left over. Not bad. I ended up making just the right amount, I feel. And the way that breaks down is 134 of its plastic, 307 of its rubber. Alright, so let me show you the last bit of load balancing for the rubber. I've got a line of 70 rubber that was just going to the sink, and so I took that and then did a little bit of balancing. Out of here, we've got 10, and then out of there, we've got the 53. Each of those freight cars need 853, and 2 of them already have 800. So now 1 of them is done. And then the last 7 are going to the sink. This line of 10 goes around my elevator, and then meets up with this last balancer. This is taking the line of 496 that I already had, and splitting it 453 because one of the freight cars had 400. So now that one's all done. And then the remainder of 43, which if we come over here, meets up with my 10, and now I've got 53. Instead of a giant opening, it finally has a back wall and a window. Nice and simple train station, but really the best part is it just works. Having 9 train stations, and some of them even have multiple trains going there, everything seems to flow pretty quickly. And there we go. Plastic and rubber train is up and running. Next up, more aluminum. In total, I need 3,168 aluminum ingots for this project. Thankfully, this one train line that cuts through all of this, which creates just kind of a random intersection inside the train station. But hey, that's what signals are for. That train is dropping off 1,200 ingots. So I just need about 2,000. If I split that across 4 freight cars, that's 492 per minute each. And wouldn't you know it, right above the West Coast, I happen to have that many ingots laying around. And I finally added a roof to the little logistics part of the train station. Up until now, I was only using the train station on the right. Now, we're going to get good use out of this one here on the left. So the logistics floor is real small. All of the freight cars in this kind of train station are only going to be set for loading, and so I can get away with just using the smaller storage containers. We come inside the factory here. Everything's still working like a charm. And I replaced my sinks, because that's all I was doing for quite a while, was sinking the majority of these. And added some more load balancers. I already had this one here, which was turning one of the belts into 720 and 480. So with that 480, I just needed to do a little bit more balancing. And then I took the other belt to 1200 and then did this balancing. That gives me two belts of 984, which then I split in half, so I get 492 into each of those freight platforms. Now, since the aluminum ingots only stack to 100, that means each of these freight cars only have room for 3,200 at most. At 492 ingots per minute, this needs to complete a round trip in 6.5 minutes, which is just not going to happen. Even if it was able to go in a much more straight shot from here to there, it would still be cutting it close, to be honest. But with it having this kind of a trip all the way down here, and then having to make its way around here, and then down the coast and over to the Grassy Fields, 6.5 minutes is just not going to happen. So the way these are set up, if I go to edit timetable, this is the Red Jungle Aluminum 2. It's set to freight wagon is fully loaded or unloaded and waits for 0 seconds. And then it just goes to the other one and drops it off. Now what makes this work so well is I have a second train. Since I've gave myself enough space for a second train to be able to wait behind here and it won't block any traffic that still had the green light even though it was waiting here, that means I can easily have two trains running on the same exact path and be able to double my throughput. So they're both set for the same thing. They wait until the freight wagon is completely full and then they take off. And on the unload side of things, I decided to add these load balancers just right next to the rubber and the plastic, since they weren't going to fit directly behind. Train stations are pretty big, but not quite big enough to fit all of my load balancing down here. Thankfully, for 492, the balancer isn't too big. And since I needed 4 of them, of course I just made it a blueprint, which makes it really easy to just slam 4 of them down right next to each other and not waste any space. But these happen to be one of those interesting cases where the new priority mergers really came in handy. When I first checked it, all of them were reading about 477, but of course they're supposed to be 492. So I switched all of these to be priority mergers, the very first ones, and then I switched the very center input to be the highest priority. So that way, this will always be 780, because I think what was happening is since this is a 780, whenever these would come in, if they kind of competed on the belt, it would slow down this belt. And then I would be only moving, 779 or 778 or something like that. It's just enough to throw things off. But using the priority merger can ensure that this will stay at 780. And since this belt already has some gaps on here, as we can see, if they stutter right here before they enter the merger, it doesn't make any difference. And now I've got my 492 on each of the lines. And now I've added another train station. This one's going to take care of the odds and ends. I still need to bring in the dark matter crystals, the singularity cells, and the superposition oscillators. That's what this train station will take care of. We take a look at the map. Unfortunately, I would love for all my buildings to show up, but as you can see, it's starting to take a really long time when I load up a save to actually build out the whole map now that we're at the very end game here. But if we spread out here, I can show you where things are. So over here in the Rocky Desert, I am making all of the superposition oscillators that I need and some of the dark matter crystals. Over here in the Dune Desert, I recently made a huge factory to make a whole bunch of singularity cells, and so that is where the majority of them are going to go, get put on a train, and head out here. Down in the Blue Crater, I'm making power shards and alien power matrices, and that also had a byproduct of extra dark matter crystals, so I need to pick those up. And then lastly, this factory right here, making the AI expansion servers, has an extra 240 of those dark matter crystals per minute. So thankfully I don't have to put those on a train. First stop, Rocky Desert. The big old tower on the right is making all of the superposition oscillators, and they are all headed right to this train station, which now has a roof. I didn't want the train station to block too much of the view of all the towers behind it, so I didn't want to make it too tall. Just a really simple entrance and exit on the other side. First train station up here is completely full. The second one, however, is only dealing with the items that are in pretty low quantities. Let's go ahead and change this icon because I'm not making 320 of these. I am shipping out 320 dark matter crystals per minute from here though. Conveniently enough for me, I already have a train running from here out to the Grassy Fields. It was carrying 4 of the magnetic field generators and 8 of the superposition oscillators already for the AI expansion servers. So I can just expand it, rearrange things just ever so slightly, and I can easily add on the 320 dark matter crystals and the extra 40 superposition oscillators to that same train, because this is still not that much. The dark matter crystals stacked to 200, superposition oscillators only stacked to 50, but I'll be okay. We head underneath here. Somehow a beam found its way into my logistics floor. This is in between the 2 layers of train stations, so how he got up here, I have no idea. But this is what it ended up looking like. Probably should have given myself just a little bit more room down here. Next stop, the Dune Desert. This factory is making 160 singularity cells per minute. Just a little bit of load balancing, and I've got 100 going to a train, and 60 that are still just being sunk for now. Power shards and alien power matrices. Matrices? This right here is what's giving me that extra bit of power that I need. And unlimited power shards, which I am so happy for, because I am a firm believer in just overclock everything. It's easy to make more power. I've been trying to tidy things up as I go, because for a lot of these, I'm probably not coming back anytime soon. I am going to go through and clean up the world before I share it, but it would be nice if I didn't have just half a dozen different train stations to dress up at the end. But this one, I think I am going to leave till later, because I just don't quite know how I want to do this second layer yet. So you'll just have to come back for the final world tour to see this train station completed. I was able to squeeze in one last freight platform onto this last train station on the inside here, and that is where the train will pick up the 194 dark matter crystals for the Ballistic Warp Drives. And I actually still have an excess 117 rubber here that I completely forgot about until I came to deal with this train. Whoops. Last but not least, here in the Grassy Fields, we've got the AI expansion server factory, which is attached to the train station. And it's reading 250, well, shouldn't read 257, but 256 is what it's supposed to be, because that's 240 dark matter crystals and the 16 AI expansion servers per minute. So I've got my 240 right here. This freight platform was the one that I needed to change. So if we just hop down below real quick, that goes right into a smart splitter. So we just split up the 3 different items to 3 different directions. The dark matter crystal is the center one, so that goes to this. And then 320 is nice and easy. That's just 2/3 of a 480 belt. I like that. And then for the 100, it's not much more complicated. Just into the splitter, split that into thirds. And then with one of those thirds, you just split it in half. Send the 20 back into the storage container. Group up the rest of it, and I've got my 100 singularity cells per minute. That 194 just takes a couple more splitters and mergers. This right here is the majority of the parts that I'm making that I need to bring in. But I am going to add one more train station. We take a look at the list of things that I need. The large majority of these resources are really close. For example, 1600 coal, 987 copper, almost 2600 iron. The raw quartz have to go a little bit farther, but I only need 200, so that's actually pretty easy to get to. The last of those kind of raw resources that I need is the nitrogen gas. And unfortunately, I need 3600 per minute. And if we zoom in over here, we probably won't be able to see it. We'll go over there in a second. But over on top of one of these little pillars, there is a nitrogen node. So just past the lake, we've got our nitrogen node. Completely overclocked. This will give me a total of 2100 nitrogen per minute, which means I'm still missing 1500 per minute. And that's where the next train is going to come in. For all of the liquids, when you package them, it's just a 1-to-1 ratio. I believe for all of the gases, you're going to get at least a 2-to-1 ratio, if not better. Like for the nitrogen, it is a 4-to-1. Meaning at 100%, one packager can take 240 nitrogen per minute and compress that down to 60 of the packaged nitrogen gas. Now, these do only stack to 100, but you have to admit that is a pretty nice ratio, which makes packaging it way more efficient than if you were to use the fluid trains, which I would not recommend for trains. I've done it before. I don't think I'll do it again. And don't worry, when you unpackage it, you still get the same ratio. So that 60 packaged nitrogen becomes 240 nitrogen gas again. The only downside to doing it this way is I'm going to need a lot of those empty fluid containers to handle a loop this size. But hey, you only need aluminum ingots to make them. I think I'll be alright. The closed nitrogen is that one. And, there is a little bit of nitrogen left over here, which this train station is built directly on top of. But I don't really think I want to add another train station and just more of a mess underneath there. There's also some down here. There's some all the way over here, so I could add a train station over here, and that would probably be the closest option. It's somewhere over here. But instead, I'm going to come all the way up here to the northwest corner. Right behind the rocky desert, if we just back up a little bit more, I am actually already using this nitrogen node. It's making my 1 fuse modular frame per minute that's going to my dimensional depots, which even at 1 a minute, I'm sure I'm probably sinking 99% of them. And now I'm using most of the other little satellite nodes as well. These are overclocked to 125%, so each one will output 75. And the reason I'm doing this amount and not more, because obviously I could have overclocked these more and then I wouldn't have an odd number like 5 to deal with, because I've got my 5-way split here. This could have been easier if I overclocked them a little bit more and only had 4. But the reason for this is now each one needs exactly 300 nitrogen gas per minute. And if we come down here, each one of these puts out exactly 300. So this way, I don't need to combine any pipes. I can just take one satellite node to one packager. I can deal with the more complicated load balancing for the belts. I just want the pipes to be as simple as possible. And here we've got my little train station that I've added. And because I really liked my water level train supports that I used over there, I decided to reuse them. And this was another reason why I wanted to use this nitrogen node, is I was able to make just a giant train path out on the ocean that goes all the way out there. But I'll show you that in a second. It's just got a single path, so the train comes in here, we dock, and then exits that way, and then rejoins up with the track. This should only ever need one train, so that's why there is a just gigantic stretch of just a single track. Because if only one train is ever going to come out here, I don't have to worry about traffic. On this section, at least. So from here, if we head on into the train station, we've just got a little bit of platforms. Once this is up and running, I don't really see myself coming back here too often. And so we've got the little bit of load balancing we need to do. The first 2 freight cars are going to deal with the packaged nitrogen, so I only need the small storage container, just feeding right into the freight platform. The other 2 are dealing with the empty fluid containers, so those are dealing with them on the kind of return trip. So this is where they're getting dropped off. They go into the storage containers, and then we've just got a little bit of load balancing for each one of these. There's a number of different ways you could go about doing this sort of a thing. Normally, I try to avoid the decimal points just because, well, it's just easier to follow with whole numbers. But at the end of the day, the decimal point is just another fraction, and we can deal with those. I thought the easiest way to deal with 187.5, instead of breaking things all the way down to the point where I have 1 and then I split that in half, which would be a fine way to do it. The other way is I could make 375 and then just split that in half. So the majority of this load balancer is to make 375, and that would be coming out of this merger right there. But instead, it goes into a splitter and then splits that in half. So there is 187.5, then the other 187.5 just loops back into the storage container. And I've just got my little temporary setup right here, and I'm just loading up a bunch of storage containers with empty fluid containers. I know I'm gonna need a few thousand in the loop most likely, so I'm just cranking out a few right now. Unfortunately, I don't have a great way of getting all of this up and running and then being able to actually test it out, unless I want a continuous supply of those fluid canisters and then I could just sink them. But since I don't want to do that, I don't really have a good way of sinking the nitrogen gas. So as much as I would like to, there's not a great way of testing this ahead of time, unfortunately. So since that train's not running, let's just make another one, and we'll give you a quick train ride to show you this little ocean track. I wasn't paying attention, and now I'm on the wrong side. But thankfully, there's no trains coming this way. Whew, that could have been bad. Let's go ahead and just delete this before I forget. This was originally a 3-way intersection, and now it's a 4-way. But like I said, only one train should ever be going this direction. Since it has 4 freight cars in total, so 2 for the package, 2 for just the empty canisters, at less than 2 stacks per minute, one train is going to be able to handle all the nitrogen just fine. And I do like the way the 4-way intersections look. I think that's all the trains I need? You never really know. I do still need to deal with the local nitrogen, but it's close enough that I'm not going to use a train. I'll deal with it in some other way. I am going to put that off till later. Let's start building something. So this big old space right here seems like a great spot to put the factory. There's plenty of iron, limestone, and copper just all in this area, so I don't have to worry about any of that. I need 1600 coal, and I haven't used any of it that's down here in this little crater lake. So I'm thinking instead of doing just one giant factory, I'm going to split off a few more of the recipes into their own factory, which means I probably should have included this little one in the last video, but hey, hindsight's 2020, isn't it? And then the rest of the factory will be down there in the grassy fields, but if I do one right over here, it won't be too far to belt over to the train station, and then from the train station, I'll have a whole bunch of belts that are going over to the factory. So here's the plan for everything today, which is a lot, and probably not even readable on the screen. So instead, let's just talk about this section. I'm going to deal with all of the basically steel parts. I'm going to make a little factory here, and I may make it dual purpose, so I'm going to build it on top of the lake. Because I do need a little bit of water for the main factory, and I don't know if I want to use this or some other source. So I'm going to build this factory just right in the middle of the lake, and it's going to produce all of the steel pipes, iron rods, because I want to use the steel rod recipe, steel beams, and encased industrial beams. All of the coal I need is right below me, and there's probably enough iron just right above here. So I get to keep the belts relatively short for all of these, and by splitting this off, it will take out at least one whole floor out of that main factory, and, well, the belt work's already going to get crazy, so I think having a number of these things already done will probably make my life easier. First floor of foundations is in. It's raised up just high enough that I can fit the water extractors under here if I decide to go that route. We're going to do this one like so many other towers, and we're going to start with the basics and work our way up. I'm using the solid steel ingot, meaning I need to turn all of my iron ore into ingots first and then combine them with coal. At 100%, I need 53 1/3 smelters. Instead, I'm going to reduce that down to 32. I could bring it down to even less, but the reason I'm doing that amount, I made this little blueprint right here. Each smelter is overclocked to 166 2/3%, which means they'll intake 50 ore and output 50 iron ingots. 2 of the smelters are then grouped together. They feed into one foundry, which is completely overclocked. So it'll intake the 100 iron ingots, and then I just need to plug in the 100 coal. And each foundry will output 150 steel ingots. So if I were to do the two steps completely separate, I could have gotten away with using less smelters. But I really like being able to do this where I can, because if you can just directly feed one set of machines into the next, it just means I don't have to group everything up and then reload balance it all. And with these completely overclocked, that means instead of needing 40 foundries, I only need 16, which means I'm going to have two sets of these blueprints on this side. And we're going to spin this around. And I am going to worry about a walkway and all of that afterwards. We are just getting the machines in place here. So I will need a little bit more space to do the actual belt work, but as long as I have enough room here in the very center, I'll be fine. Each one of these foundries needs 100 coal, which means I need to plug 400 coal into each one of these splitters. So to deal with that, what I am going to do is spin this splitter around and then get it lined up right next to those ones. Now I can take a Mark IV belt and plug it into each of those splitters. And we'll just place a floor hole down here. And now I just need to plug 800 coal right into there. Moving on to the second floor. This one isn't going to have as many machines because I need the space to do some load balancing. I decided to group the foundries in groups of 4. Since each one's outputting 150, that gives me 4 belts of 600. So up here, I'm going to do a little bit of load balancing, and then the next floors we'll use them. But up here, I'm also going to do the concrete. Even though the closest node is that one right here, unfortunately, that one isn't enough. And the next closest one is a pure node, which is enough. So I'm just going to be using that one, which is coming from up there, I think. So I wanted to plug in on this side. I only need 8 constructors to deal with this, so we can just do 2 of these blueprints right next to each other. And joining them up is going to be as simple as just one splitter here in the middle. And might as well just give myself as much space as possible for the load balancing. Since I brought those all the way to the edge, might as well bring this one all the way to the edge too. I'm going to be making 300 concrete across the 8 machines. So these are all completely overclocked. Being able to just place 8 instead of 20 is pretty nice. I'll need to plug in 900 limestone here. And that'll get split in half, so 450 there and 450 there. The way I'm going to do this is just have some spots on either side to bring up these belts. It's going to be easiest just to bring them out on either side, in my opinion. It means we'll have one here and one here, and each of these will be belts of 600. The large majority of the steel ingots are going to be turned into steel pipes. But I do need 492 of the ingots to go to steel beams, and 72 to make the iron rods. And that's the reason I didn't combine these into 1200 belts, is it's a little bit easier to work with just a 600 belt and split it 492, 72, and 36. And it turns out all of those numbers are divisible by 12, so we can reduce all of this to 50 into 41, 6, and 3. Which is just a little bit easier for me to work out. So here's the diagram. We're going to start with a splitter. And since I should have plenty of space, I'm just going to give these 2 meters instead of my normal 1. So 1 merger and then followed by 2 splitters. So that is a 5-way split. And then we do it again. Merger and 2 splitters. To get things grouped up on this side, the 41 is going to be the 492. So we're going to start with the third one in with the second splitter. And that needs a merger there. And then 1 at the very end. And then on the right side, we just need 1 merger right here, because out of this splitter is going to be the 3 or the 36. Following the diagram, I just need to multiply all of these numbers by 12 to make sure I have the right things. So we've got a belt of 600, and that gets split in half. 300 and 300. That 300 is then going into a 5-way split, so this belt is going to become 360, 180, and 180. We've got 60, 60, and then for the last 60, we're just going to go up and over. And then with this 60, we're doing another 5-way split, so that means this will become 72. We've got our 36 and 36, 12, 12, and then the 12 that loops back. Now I've got my 492 and 72, and 36. Now I have it all split up. Like I mentioned, the large majority of this is going to steel pipes. 1836 of the steel ingots. That doesn't all fit on one belt. Right now I've got 3 belts of 600 and then 1 belt of 36. So I think this is time for a good old 4-to-4 belt balancer. We're just going to put this right here in the middle and slam this all the way up against the side. This will give me 4 equal belts of 459. And they're all going to exit right here. So I can just have this plug right into the next floor. At 100%, I would need 61.2 constructors. So at a very minimum, I would need to use 25, even if I completely overclock them. But 5 groups of 5 doesn't really sound great. I could rebalance those and do a 4-to-5 balancer for the belts. Or I could just place a few more machines and make things a little bit easier and more divisible by 4. Let's just place 32. Here's what I'm thinking. Since I don't want to make this floor huge, and 32 still takes up a decent amount of space, can do things a little bit different. I'm actually going to end up spreading these out just a little bit. And then we're going to go vertical. Let's see, is that a good amount of space? Let's see if it's an even amount of foundations. That right there would be probably just enough clearance. So why don't we go up this high, and then let's place a 2 meter. Yeah, I think that'll be good. So instead of going just directly on top, I'm not gonna just leave them floating. So that's 16, and that's half of the constructors. So now I am just gonna mirror that on this side. And that will give me plenty of space to bring up all of the lifts from underneath. Those are probably not quite in the right spot. And now this lines up pretty nicely because I just grouped 2 sets of the blueprints together, whether it's the top of the bottom or just both of the ones on the bottom and both of the ones on the top. I can kind of play around with it and see which one looks good. And I think doing it this way turned out alright. I'm happy with the way that it looks. And I feel like they're pretty well supported now. I used a bunch of the big frame pillars and then a whole bunch of the small frame pillars to just kind of run across the top. And now doing the power connections is real easy because it's pretty much all hidden. And since there's only some splitters and belts on this side, I just use the inverted ramp. Although I do still need to group them together, so I'll have to figure out this side. But for now, let's go ahead and move on to the final floor. This one is going to do the iron rods, the steel beams, and the encased industrial beams. None of these need nearly as many machines. For the encased industrial beams, I only need 6 assemblers, so let's go ahead and start with these because I guess that does take up the most amount of space. And then I just need 2 splitters here in the very center. The good old encased industrial pipe recipe, gotta love it. These are completely overclocked, so each one will produce 10. We'll have them grouped together here. And then the main output line, we're just gonna have run right down the very center. That should be the middle of the floor, yeah. I think right about here is where we'll center the other 2 recipes. I need 3 constructors for the iron rods, so we'll place this right here. And last but not least, 4 constructors for the steel beams. Using the steel rod recipe, need more power shards. I think I automated those. I'm going to be making 288, and it only needs 3 machines. That is pretty nice. The steel beams, I'm making 123 across the 4, 30 and 3/4 each. But all of these fit on one belt, and we're definitely going to use a sushi belt to take it into the train station, and then from the train station onto the main factory. But one thing that I've learned, this right here is kind of close to the belt limit. 288 rods, 123 steel beams, and 60 of the encased industrial beams. 471 total. meaning I can use a Mark IV belt and it would be nice and mostly full, which is what I prefer to do, and I am going to do that. So in situations like this where there's not a ton of wiggle room and I'm dealing with 3 different belt speeds, I've got a Mark IV, a Mark I, and a Mark III, don't think the merger deals with this the best. So maybe your priority merger would work well and you could figure out which one to have the right priority, and then that way I could keep all of these kind of the lowest speeds that I need. I think making all of these Mark IV so that they're all the same speed, the merger just has a much easier time bringing those all together, and then this will work out and none of these should back up this way. Well, that is all of the machines I need to manufacture the steel parts that I need. So the next step is, well, I've already got the miners place, which I don't think I showed off, but we've got the 4 miners over here. I've got the 2 iron nodes that I need, and then the 1 limestone right behind it. So I just need to make the short distance from all of these nodes over to the factory, but it's really not far, so that's going to be easy. And then I need to do a little bit more belt work to get things to go from one floor to the next, and then power it all. I am going to save the decorating till the very end, because one, I just don't really know how I want to decorate it, and I think I'll probably end up using this as kind of a trial run to see what I want to do for the main factory. So I'm going to save the decorating until the very end, but we're definitely going to get this up and running ahead of time. And just like that, everything but the decorations are in place. We've got the elevator to take us floor to floor, and more importantly, easily run power throughout the tower. For now, they're just going to be going into sinks, but this will be more or less the path, I think, I could always change it, that it'll take and then somehow get over to the train station. So starting all the way out here, we've got the 3 nodes from up top, the limestone and the 2 iron nodes. The iron nodes are just getting combined together, and then the limestone, because it's 900, that's on its own. Those just head down this way, meet up with one of the coal belts, and then they head on into the factory. And then on this side, we've got the other 2 coal nodes. Now, I needed 1600 coal. So in reality, I only needed 3 out of the 4 coal nodes, and I could have rebalanced these. But since this is the last factory, I figured let's just make things easiest on myself. Clock each one to 400, and then just combine them into 2 equal belts of 800. This is a full 1200 belt of iron, and so that is going underneath the factory, and then it is going into a splitter, so it gets split 400 3 ways. Those are both impure nodes putting out 200. Combining those 2 gives me the last 400 that I need for the very last set of smelters. There's still room for a couple water extractors down here, but I'm already thinking I've got a different idea for how I'm going to get my water into the main factory. So this is most likely just going to stay a little logistics floor. The steel goes from the first floor up to the second floor, where we've got the concrete and the load balancing, and then from there we go up to the steel pipes. And then I did forget to show this off, but I needed to do just a little bit of load balancing. I took half of the steel pipes, which is 612, and then I split them 360 and 252. Luckily enough for me, I can actually reduce this ratio down to 17 into 10 and 7. This splits off the 360 steel pipes I need for the encased industrial beams, which then, as you can see, go into a lift and go up to this floor and feed into the assemblers. Nice, quick, and easy factory to put together. So to get this started, we're just going to send everything in. Let's see how long this takes. And just like that, we've got the 470 to 472, and then the 863 to 865, which should be 864. We're looking good. Now, I just get to let this run for hours as I work on the main factory. But I feel pretty confident that I'm not going to have any issues here. All right, now we can finally get started on this last factory. And this is a nice, huge area. Even with the little bit of terrain that I have to work around, it's just a few of these kind of rocks and whatnot. So the very first floor is probably going to go above it, which gives me plenty of space down here to do logistics and whatnot. I think this location is going to work out pretty nicely. So let me get started with the foundations, and then we'll go from there. I think a 30 by 30 foundation base is a good one to start with. As you've already seen in the thumbnail and the preview, it's going to change shape. I've broken down my plan into what's going to fit onto each of the different floors. This is what's going to happen on this very bottom floor. It's taking care of a lot of the base level things, and then we'll just get more and more complex as we move up. Let's go ahead and start on this end right here. Here's my marker for the very middle of the floor, and we're going to get started with the copper alloy ingot. I need 8 foundries in total, so we'll just do 4 on that half, and the other 4 on the other side. I'm going to be making 1974 across the 8 machines, 246.75 for each one. I'm going to need to do a little bit of load balancing because the copper ingots don't all go to the same place. But before we get to that, there's one more set of machines I'm going to put right next to these. I want to do the iron ingots, and those will directly feed into the assemblers making the iron plates. To get this all lined up, I'm actually going to place the assemblers first. So I'm just going to use my 3 assembler blueprint. Go ahead and place that. Let's go ahead and set this recipe. I am using the coated iron plate. I can make 390 with only 3 machines. And now what I'm going to do is delete this very bottom layer. Now I'm going to line up my smelters more or less with these foundries, and then also in line with each of these inputs. That looks good. This needs 195 across the 3 machines, so 65 for each one, and if I double check, yep, that's what this machine needs, so just need a Mark II belt, each of these smelters right into the assemblers. And now I just need 1 smelter in the front, and Mark II belts into all of these. I'm just missing 39 plastic, and this will create all of the iron plates I need. On the other side of the foundries, I am going to go ahead and place a set of 3 constructors. These 3 are going to be making my quartz crystal, and these are going to be clocked to 40 for each one because I need 120 in total. And the quartz is all done. Alright, so before I move on to the next layer of machines, I probably need to do the load balancing for this, just to make sure I have enough space. Each foundry is outputting, 246.75. Each set of 4 will output 987, so that's what I have coming out of each of these mergers. The majority of the copper ingots are going to the aluminum casings. 1584 in total are going there, and I need 390 to become wire. And so here's the diagram we're working with. I'm going to take that 987 and split it 390 and then the 597. Normally, I would just kind of go out in a straight line this way, but that's going to take up a kind of a weird amount of space. So instead, I think we're going to go sideways here. And I know on the diagram it has that merger plugging into the right side, but instead I'm going to have this one plug right into the right side, and we'll figure out that last belt later. So we start with the merger, and then we switch to the splitter. Now, I should have plenty of room in this factory, so I'm going to try to give most things just a little bit of space. I'm going to give all of these a 2-meter gap, and we're going to do 6 splitters in a row. And then we finish with the 5-way split, so a merger and 2 splitters. Switch to a merger, and on the right side, we've got one that goes here. Skip those 2, put 1 here, and 2 more afterwards. Skip 1 more, and then there we go. And for the very last row, that's going to come all the way out to here. Normally it would come all the way out to here. Instead, we're just going to plop it directly on top of that one and face it backwards. On the left hand side, I just need 1 merger, and that's going to go right next to this one. Got my 987, plugs into the merger. Once I loop back 93, that's going to make this 1080. There's a much nicer number to work with because now I can split it 360 onto 3 different belts. 180 and 180. And instead of going all the way out to the side, this 90 is just going to plug into the merger right here. And it'll just go all the way back straight into here. Go ahead and just place that belt now. Alright, so right after that, we've got 90 into this one. 30, 30, and 30. We split that 3 ways, and on each one of these, now we do need another little short lift, go up and over. With this then, we're going to split it in half. Now that we're down to 5, we just do the 5-way split. So that'll become 6. So we're going to loop this one back, making this one 3. And then this 3 is going to go up. And it needs to plug into here. So I guess, because I obviously don't want to clip these, this one will just go up one higher. There we go. Now out of here, I've got my 390. And we just need to run a belt through the middle of all these mergers. And out of here, I've got my 597. Combine that with the 987 here, and that is all I need for the aluminum casing. Alright, so with this 390, I'm actually going to spin this around. Wouldn't have it facing straight out this way. The 390 are going to be all turned into wire, and for that, I need 12 constructors. And to do that, I know I'm going to do 3 sets of 4, so let's go ahead and just place one splitter here. We'll just line up the first one here, and then one on either side. 780 across 12 machines, 65 for each one. And of course, we've got to color them all copper. That'll be 390 into there, 130 into each one of these. Well, now that we have the wire done and the plates done, I think I want to do the reinforced iron plates so that these can more or less just feed right into the next step. I've got these grouped together, so now out of each of these mergers, I've got 260 wire. I need 9 assemblers, and so I am just going to pair up a set of 3 assemblers with a set of the 4 constructors, and I'm just going to line up the very bottom set to go right with this one. And then I'm just going to line these up so I can just directly feed the wires straight into those assemblers. So that should line up nicely there. This spot will have just a little bit of a gap. And then we switch to my other one. Now they will line up right next to each other. Obviously using the stitched iron plate, each machine will be making 13. And now I can double check my numbers and make sure everything adds up. So 86 and 2/3. Need a Mark III belt for these. And then each one of these assemblers will feed into one of these sets of blueprints. Instead of combining them and then resplitting them up, I'm just going to run the 3 separate belts. Just because I think it'll look cooler. One of the other recipes that doesn't need too many machines, this one right here, we'll just need one more set of 4 constructors. And that's going to take care of all the concrete I need, which is 132 across the 4, 33 each one. Perfect. Alright, 2 last sets of recipes for these last machines. Let's go ahead and take care of the quick wire right over here. I need 18 constructors, so instead of doing them in one really long line, I'm going to do 2 sets of 9. Because all of the ingots are going to come from one belt. So this way I can have them all feed in together. Making this much quick wire won't fit on one outgoing belt, so it's fine that the outputs are kind of facing the outside. I think 3 foundations on either side should be plenty of space, so let's just go with the first one. Alright, so there is the first 9. And let's see, so if we place a splitter there, that'll be for those 3, and then the very middle one will be right here. That'll go there. Just the regular quick wire recipe. I'm going to be making 2,670, almost completely overclocked. 148 and 1/3. Of course, we got to make these Caterium. Just a little bit of belt work. Last set of machines for this floor, I'm going to go ahead and put over here. We'll start from this side. So I need 9 assemblers for this. I need 2,376 casings. Thankfully, only 9 machines. 264 for each one. Now with the aluminum, I'm going to be able to kind of load balance those into the 3 correct belts that they need to be from the train station when they're coming over here. So that I don't really have to worry about, and those are just going to be fed from down below. The other input is the copper. And for that, I've got my 987, and I think that's like 587. So what I'm going to do, really any excuse I have to use my good old 2 to 3 belt balancer with my curved belts, I'll take it. But then I'll take the 2 unequal belts, and this will spit out 3 even belts. Just to make sure they're high enough speed, and I just think they look cool. We're going to make all of these Mark 6 and make the whole thing copper. So that's what's going to be on these belts. Let me skip over that simple belt work and add another floor. Alright, now most of the basic belt work is in, so this is going to take the iron plates from those assemblers over to these ones. And then the copper goes around all those machines, plugs into the belt balancer, and then into these 3 blueprints. And now we can move on. Floor number 2. The final output for this floor is just the motors. So it's going to take care of the stators, the rotors, and to make the rotors, I decided to use the copper rotor recipe. Why? Mainly because I never use it, because it needs so many screws. As you can see on the spreadsheet, I need 6,396 screws. But depending on how you lay everything out, I promise it's not actually that bad, and instead, it's going to look really cool. Alright, so the way this is going to work is we're going to start with the screws and the rotors, and then we'll make the stators, and then the motors. So things are just going to kind of flow this way. So the constructors will go right along this row, but to get everything spaced out just right, I'm just going to set that there now. Now I'm going to switch to my 5 assembler blueprints. For the rotors, I need 20 assemblers. That means I'm going to do my 5 assemblers B, and then I'm going to switch back to 5 assemblers A, and you're going to see why in a second. Should put me right in the middle of the floor. Perfect. And then we mirror that one more time. Alright, so now I'm going to delete half of the belt work, but it does make things just a lot easier having the whole top part already done. The bottom part is now irrelevant. These assemblers, like I said, are going to be using the copper rotor alternate recipe. I'm going to be making 369 across the 20 machines, so each of these is going to output 18.45. Even though I need a ton of screws, the total amount of copper sheets is only 738, so that all fits on one belt. And that's why I laid out the blueprints like I did, and now I can place one splitter here. We nudge it up the 2 meters. And that's going to feed this side, that'll feed this side. And then I just need one more splitter right in the very center. And that'll load balance all of the copper sheets. Oops, needs to be the second height. Now I have a much easier time doing the constructors. It's pretty much this floor and the ones going up where I decide really kind of want to just show off the load balancing. So where I would normally try to put the splitter nice and close up here, so I'm just really going to let things take up space. And for every 2 of those assemblers, I need 1 splitter. Let's just get a couple of these placed. And then, well, thankfully that one was actually lined up. I am definitely taking advantage of the steel screw alternate recipe. And that way I can have 1 constructor feed 2 of these. Each of these machines needs 319.8. I can just do 319.8 times 2, 639.6. And I can double check. I'm going to be placing 10 of these. And there's the 6,396 total screws. So everything checks out. Just need a Mark 5 into there. And then some Mark 4 belts into here. This is going to be a very common theme in this floor and, well, this factory in general. When I have huge numbers to deal with, like that crazy amount of screws, it is so much easier if I can just have 1 constructor feed into 2 assemblers, or however the ratio works out. You can clock it so the machines line up much nicer, and that way I just don't have to deal with any crazy belt balancers for this. From here, I am going to merge up all of the rotors together, Actually, I don't need one there. They're all going to go this way. The next two steps are the stators and then the motors. And then the motors bring together these two. For the stators, all of them are being turned into motors. However, with all of these machines making the rotors, I do need to split those. 324 of them, so the large majority, are being turned into motors. But I need to split off 45 for the smart plating. I've got a good amount of space to work with here, but just to make sure that I don't screw anything up, I am now going to jump to the end step and work my way back, and then I'll leave the very middle for the load balancing. The very last step is 18 assemblers for the motors. I'm just going to use my two different 3 assembler blueprints, just so they pair up nicely. Just realized I should have done that backwards. There we go. Now those pair up nicely. 6 sets of 3, there's my 18. With the default motor recipe, I'm going to be making 162 in total. 9 for each one, nice even numbers for everything. And this is the reason why I laid everything out this way, because the stators need the exact same amount of assemblers, and I'm not making any extras, so all of these are going to be able to just directly feed into the next set. Which does mean I'm going to have to delete the whole bottom section again, but I think it's all worth it. We can delete those, and when we set this recipe, instead of the regular stators, we are using the quick wire stators. Each one of the motor machines needs 18. So these are overclocked to exactly the 18. I actually need to move these over by 2 meters. And now, go ahead and repaste that recipe. Now these will be able to directly feed. Nice straight belt. Oh, I think it's worth it. I'm just going to redo that one so that I can just keep these straight. And so by doing that, it'll keep most of these so they can just be straight belts right into there. And it's going to give me a little bit of a gap right down the middle so that I'll be able to take the rotors from here, and those will just get load balanced across all of these. Which it looks like I've got plenty of space to do it in right here. So here's the diagram that I'm going to be using. I'm going to take the 369 rotors. I'll loop back 15 so that I can actually work with 384, which is a convenient number because I can split that into thirds and then in half a whole bunch of times. And this is how it turned out. The 324 rotors that I need for the motors will just go up and over all of this stuff and then feed into all of these. I've also got all the constructors in, so the 123 steel beams will end up turning into my 6,000 something screws, and then those will just feed right into the assemblers. I think it's going to look pretty cool, and I think I forgot to mention it, but the best part about using the copper rotor recipe, you produce them at a much higher rate than the other two recipes. So even though I do need screws, I end up needing less than half the amount of assemblers I would with my normal recipe that I would usually use. And I'm happy about that. On to the next floor, where we're making the cooling systems and the fused modular frames. And I think this floor is where we're going to end up starting to change the shape a little bit, because I don't think this is actually going to be wide enough. So what I want to make first is the heat sinks and the cooling systems. Thankfully, all of the heat sinks are going directly to the cooling systems, so I can make that a little bit easier on myself. And I think the number that's going to work out best is going to be 12 for each of the machines. So 12 blenders, 12 assemblers. Now on this floor, I'm probably going to end up with a good amount of space. But I also want to make sure that I've got plenty of room for the extra belts and pipes that I'm going to need. To get things lined up right, I'm going to get this just on one side of the half mark. Let's go out to there. This is going to be a very spacious floor. So let's start with one there, and let's go ahead and just set the recipe. This is going to be doing just the default cooling system recipe. I need heat sinks, the rubber I'm bringing in by train. I'm still going to need to figure out the water, and then this is where a whole bunch of the nitrogen gas is going. I still need 450 of it to go to the fused modular frames, but over 3,000 of what I need is going here. 126 across the 12 machines. Each one will make 10.5. I'm going to give them about one foundation as a gap. There's 6, and that'll be the first half. And Not sure, I may play around with the spacing, but this is the idea. Give all of this plenty of space, so yeah, 3 foundations should be good. I'm just going to line up the assemblers with the far solid input. And these are going to be doing the heat exchanger alternate. 252 in total across 12. 21 for each machine. Which we can double check. Yep, that's what each of these need. Perfect. And these will be able to just plug straight in. And then on the far right input, I'm going to line up a packager. Each one of these blenders needs 262.5 nitrogen gas, so that is what I'm going to set each one of these for. Thankfully, with unlimited power shards, this really doesn't feel like a waste at all. Obviously, you could get more out of each packager, so you use less of them. But just having one pipe go from one machine to the next and not dealing with any junctions just works really well. So I just need to copy this a bunch more times on the other half. The final step is making the fuse modular frames, so for that I'm going to need 6 blenders. And I am just using the default recipe. So there are definitely advantages to using the heat fused frame. Like for example, I would have gone through much less aluminum. But then I do have to turn the nitrogen into acid, and I need to bring in fuel. So it really just depends on what you rather do. And for me, I just went with mass producing more aluminum instead, and we're just going to use the default. I'm going to be making 18 across 6 machines, exactly 200%, 3 for each one. And these also need nitrogen gas, but for this one, it's going to be a little bit easier. With one machine being able to output 450 and that not being anywhere close to the 600 limit in the Mark II pipe, I feel confident just using the one packager and splitting it across the 6 machines. So that's just some more basic belt and pipe work to load across there. But that takes care of the nitrogen gas. The aluminum casings are coming from down below. Heavy modular frames. To make 18 heavy modular frames, I just need 3 manufacturers. The heavy encased frame alternate is definitely my favorite to use. Each machine can output 6, even though I would normally like to do it where I had one machine feed into 2 of those. This is the one time where I think I'm probably just going to group those up and have them come over here and feed into the blenders. Getting the manufacturers to feed directly into the blenders was just not going to work out great unless I wanted to extend the floor and make it a weird shape or something. All the machines are in place for this floor at least. And then the real basic stuff where the assembler just belts straight into here, and then the basic belt and pipe work for this stuff. And then because we've got the space, this is where I decided to change things up and let the load balancing really take up some more space. So I decided to stagger all of the initial splitters, and that way it kind of displays everything even better. Because let's be honest, that is a big reason why I like doing the load balancing. I just like the way that it looks. I like the way that the items just flow along the belts and there's no stuttering. So let's just put it on display in this last factory. And then I tried to do more or less the same thing. With blenders, it's a little bit harder since you have both solid and fluid inputs. Still got a little bit of load balancing to do for the packagers and the assemblers, but since I'm dealing with the total of 12 of each of those, that balances out really nicely. And I gave myself plenty of space, so I'm just going to worry about that later. Let me go ahead and add another floor. This is going to be the turbo motor floor. It's going to have slightly different dimensions than most of the others. If we look at the plan, this floor is going to start with making the crystal oscillators and the circuit boards. Those are going to feed into the radio control units, and then those are going to feed into the turbo motors. And with pretty much all of these, I can make them in really convenient amounts. I'm either going to be using 4 or 8 machines for the assemblers. So with this one, I'm going to work backwards again. So things are going to start all the way back there, and they're going to feed this way. So this is going to be the final step. There's the 4 manufacturers. Good old default turbo motor recipe. And I'll be making 18 in total. From here, I'm going to do my little tiered load balancing again. So the way I do that is, that's about as close as I can get. So since I'm kind of giving everything some space, and I like things to line up easy, I just start here, then I'm going to lock it in place, and then using page up, we're going to nudge it up to the very top spot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 meters. So that'll line up with those lifts. So that one took up that half of the foundations. So this one's going to line up right here. And then this is just going to go up to the next one. And then I just do that all the way out. And then just using good old straight mode, we just connect all of the belts and we get this cool little tiered effect. And now I can just grab the same blueprints and we're just going to line these right up. Give everything a little bit more space. This row of manufacturers will be doing the radio control units. But for this one, I'm going to be using the radio control system. 36 across 4, so 9 for each one, and I can double check. That should be what this needs. Yep, perfect. So actually, what I'm probably going to do is just delete this very top one. The other 3 parts will be coming in by belt, so they'll take up the bottom ones, and then from here, we'll probably do something like this. Yeah, that'll work out pretty well. The last 2 sets of recipes, circuit boards, and then the crystal oscillators. In the new theme of this factory, I made a new blueprint so that I could stretch out the 2 splitters. And then we're going to line up every 2 of these is going to go into one manufacturer. Since these are the exact same width as each manufacturer, I'm just going to center them on each one. And I'll probably just have to redo the merger. Now this doesn't plug straight into anything. So what I'll do is I'll just rearrange these so that they line up with one of them. Probably go with that one. And that way I can keep the belt straight. These are using just the good old default recipe for the circuit boards. There are a lot of great options. The only issue with most of these are the rates that you end up making them and kind of the ratios that I had to deal with. But the default recipe is just always easy to work with because you make them 1 at a time versus either 5 at a time, 7 at a time. The electrode circuit board isn't bad, but I didn't want to bring in petroleum coke. So that's why I went with the default one. I need 120, and I'm using 8 machines. So they're all at 200%. And like I said, this is where the shape is going to change a little bit. I'm going to go a little bit longer, and I'm probably going to be able to just cut off all of this. And I know I completely forgot to show this off, but on the second floor where I'm making the motors, it was on the spreadsheet. I just completely forgot about it. But this floor is also making the modular frames, which I need for the next floor for the heavy modular frames. So those 10 assemblers just got tacked on to the very end, and this floor got a little bit longer. But I already had a 5 assembler blueprint, so just place 2 of those and bring them together. Easy peasy. And now I just need one last set of manufacturers. And this is basically the very first row, but instead of using the default recipe, I'm definitely using the alternate. Instead of only being able to make 1 at a time, 1.88 doesn't sound like a lot, but that is a nice improvement. You definitely get to cut down on the amount of machines you need. I need 12 across the 4, so 3 for each one. Now just a whole bunch of the basic belt work. So like I said, this row is going to be able to just plug into one of them. And then for the crystal oscillators, we're going to go up to the top height. And we have to go straight. We can go right through the middle of the assemblers. And then from here, it'll just curve into the very top one. And that way I can kind of direct feed as much as possible. I think I got the height wrong on that support. I'm definitely gonna have to fix that. And add a few more belts. Now, all the basic belt work for this floor is done. And we can move on to the second to last floor. This is another one where we're switching up the shape, so instead of it being really long like this one, we're going back to being super wide. This floor is going to make my modular engines. To do that, I need 18 manufacturers, so I'm going to have one really long row, And then right before that, I'm going to have a row of 9 manufacturers making the smart plating. So since I need so many, I decided to make a blueprint. And that way I can have these spaced out just the way I want them. Got 2-in-1 blueprint, so I'm going to need 9 of them. So let's go ahead and place 1 right in the very center, and then 4 on either side. Yep, looks like this is going to be a really wide floor. This is why you need so many machines. The default rate is only 1 per minute, and I need 45. So these are completely overclocked. And now what I can do is I can come over here and make sure that I give myself enough space. We're going to line up 1 manufacturer with the center of those 2. And these will be doing the smart plating, but the plastic alternate. And these will all be overclocked to 200%. They'll each output 10. And then from here, we can go ahead and just go up to the top one. Actually, not going to be there. That's going to be the top one. Only need 3 inputs. So that's the smart plating. Rubber's coming in by train. And all the 90 motors I need are being made down below. For the smart plating, plastic's coming in by train. And then both of these are coming in from that second floor. That's pretty much it for this floor. I just need to line up the rest of these manufacturers and then a little bit more belt work. And here they all are. And I may or may not have just gotten carried away and added the last 16 manufacturers. Just 2 more rows of 8 that finishes off the tower. So the first set of 8 are going to be making the thermal propulsion rockets. And I'm going to be making 18 of them, which may be kind of a random number. Because over here, I'm making the Ballistic Warp Drives, fully overclocked and slooped, so I can get the most bang for my buck here. As far as materials go, I'm making 20, right? Let's just forget about the Somersloops for now. To make 20 of these, I need 20 thermal propulsion rockets. But this step is only going to be making 18 because everything else is balanced to only make 18. Like I'm only making 18 turbo motors and 18 fused modular frames. That's because there is actually one last thing I need to get thrown on a train. Now, thankfully, it's just the 2 thermal propulsion rockets I'm making in that tower right there. I have a train that's running from here to the Grassy Fields train station. So I'm sure I'll be able to squeeze on 2 thermal propulsion rockets per minute into a train. And that's why I'm only making 18. I'm going to be bringing in 2 by train. All of these will have to get grouped together then, because as much as I would love to direct feed them, I am not going to try to split the 2 coming in by train across all 8 of these. I think it'd just be much easier to group these 18, bring in the 2 by train, and then resplit them up. And that's the last floor. This monstrosity right here is going to crank out 40 ballistic warp drives per minute. Which means I'll have my 200 in a whole 5 minutes once this thing started. All of the machines are in place and a lot of the simple belt work is already done here. But I do still need to run things from floor to floor. And my plan for that is run them right up the center of, I guess this would be kind of the back side, since that side gets the better sun, so it gets the better thumbnails. This side is where everything from the train station is just going to make its short little trip over to here. And then I'll probably just use the very center, because that's what everything is built on, so that would be the easiest thing to do. And I'll probably let this take up a decent amount of space, because the factory is so big, it's barely even noticeable. So hopefully that's enough space. If not, I can always go out another one. But that gives me a lot of area to work with to go up and down the tower. I guess everything's really only going up, which is good. Oh, I knew I accidentally placed one of these underneath. There it went. And now I want to pave this entire area, because this is where I'm going to be able to do all of the load balancing from the trains. Because there's a number of things like rubber that have to go to multiple different places. So that's the next step. I'm going to pave underneath here, and I'm going to set up my little lift highway here. And then I'm going to set up all my lifts to be able to get things from one floor to wherever they need to go. Well, it's been a few hours. I've been busy. Turns out this needed a lot of lifts. But now I have pretty much all of my in-factory beltwork done. So if we come all the way down here to the very bottom, I've even got all my load balancers in. The rubber is coming in on 3 different belts, which actually made the load balancing even easier in my opinion, because now I just have 3 different groups to work with. We come over here, it ended up being a mess once I actually added all of the belts, but before I add the belts, it was much more readable and helped a lot of figuring out where things were going to go. The rubber's coming in on those 3 belts, and in total I needed to split it into 6 different recipes. Each of those incoming belts have 853, so the first one splits off 756 and 97. The second one splits at 675, 94, and hidden right here is 84. And then the last one splits at 432, 360, and 61. As you can tell, for some of these, I just ran them along the ground to where it would be easiest to add the lift and then just have that go straight up, and then that way it could just go directly into the corresponding lift. After the 3 rubber belts, we're going to do the plastic load balancer. This is going to take the 654 that's coming from the train and split it 480, 135, and 39. Next up, copper sheets. The incoming belt will be 1038, so I need to split this 3 ways, 738, 240, and 60. And you gotta love the last 2. These ones are nice and simple, the steel pipes and the nitrogen. For this, I have 864, and I only need to split it into 2 places, so 648 and 216 ends up being 1/4 and 3/4, so doesn't get too much easier than that. And then with the nitrogen gas, I really thought this was going to end up being really complicated, even though there's only 2 places it needs to go. I just kind of figured it wouldn't be this simple. It ends up being 1/8 and 7/8. I also hinted at having a plan for the water, and I did figure that out, so let me show you. This is kind of the final step here, where they just go all the way up. Once they make it up to this floor, then they feed across, and then it'll drop back down. I'm pretty sure this setup should work pretty well. The other reason I'm super confident this is going to work out is if we follow this all the way back, it is going to come from the train station. So once I figure out how this last wall is going to work, that's when I'll connect these pipes. Figure it'll just be easier once I know where the wall is. But we can follow these all the way back through the train station, and well, it's going to get a little cramped there, so they just kind of hug the ceiling all the way through underneath here and pop right out here. This is going to be my source of water, and that's because I just don't want to worry about it. I'm already dealing with the packaged nitrogen. I don't want to add more headache to trying to troubleshoot things when things inevitably go wrong. It's trying really hard, but it's powered off. Each one of these is going to output 300 water, which is more than what those blenders are going to need. So that's why I'm pretty confident in the setup. As long as I have enough head lift, there isn't going to be any issue. I'm just going to shove more water in that pipe than it needs, because these are going to run at 100% no matter what. It's not going to fluctuate, and it's still going to say 100%. It's the last factory. I might as well make a thing or two easier on myself. Alright, and coming back to the factory, if you're ever looking to do a tower like this and you've got just tons of resources to move, the way I usually do it is I start at the bottom floor, and on the bottom floor I'm just bringing these straight through the floor and not using this kind of elevator shaft. So from here, the very first foundation can go from one floor to the next, and then some of them have to go even higher. But then as you go farther and farther, I basically just kind of add more and more rows. And I like to space them out at least just a little, because in spots like this, then I can bring a belt from the side and still kind of bring it into any of these middle spots. But if you make it too cramped, then it just gets really tricky to avoid the clipping anyways. When I was first laying things out, you may have noticed that I kind of alternated which direction things were going. Like this one, everything kind of feeds that way. And on this one, all of the incoming products went to the very back, and then the output is flowing this way. And then I went back and forth like that because I thought that that would be an easier way to deal with it. Instead of doing a central spot for all of the lifts, it would be easier to alternate on the different sides, and it wouldn't create such a mess of lifts. But once the factory started getting such awkward sizes going in one direction, I figured that this would be the easiest way to do it. So that's why on some of these floors, all of the incoming belts get to go all the way across the whole floor, and then everything kind of feeds back this way. Even though if I had set this floor up the opposite way, I would have cut down on the amount of belts that I need. This setup actually starts up and actually quickens the startup time for the rest of the factory because these incoming belts are all so much faster than this outgoing belt. So if the final product had to make its way all the way from the very end back to the start, it takes forever, like it will on the modular frame floor, I think. It takes quite a while for those to make its way. But this factory isn't about speed, even though I do like to time each one of them. I've definitely decided to just embrace all of the belts and show them all off. Now that I have all of the in-factory belt work done, I can kind of work backwards. So it would be easiest if the very first belt going from here to the train was rubber. And then, well, the next two, obviously, then rubber. And that way I can minimize the amount of belts that need to cross over each other, and hopefully it'll look just a little bit neater this way. And so then I'll just bring those back to here. Then I'll just have to plug up the appropriate belts over there to the appropriate lifts or belts over here. Alright, so like I said, working backwards I figured would be the easiest way. And some of these are going to be sushi belts because, well, why not? So like this one right here is going to feed right into a smart splitter. This is going to be the sushi belt from the steel factory. So I've got my beams, encased industrial beams, and the rods. And then the other one is going to have my superposition oscillators, thermal propulsion rockets, and singularity cells. I finally had a reason to use the programmable splitter, although I totally could have just split those two off and then said any undefined go forward. But the programmable works just as well too. I really wish there were more reasons to use these. There's just not a lot of situations you actually need them. There's a couple, not a lot. And so now I've got everything going in a nice huge little highway over here. And I still need to figure out where everything's coming from. Instead, I got distracted and built the other part that I needed that I've been kind of neglecting and forgot about. So this belt right here is new. So if we follow this for a while, here is the source of the quartz. This is a pure node and I only need 200, so this is definitely overkill. But it's the closest quartz node and I already have infrastructure just built right along this way. So it really didn't take that long to build out this belt from here to that train station. And honestly, it was going to be way easier than trying to figure out how to put a train station and do all that. Just for this tiny amount of quartz, I'll just hide that belt under the train line. The other thing I realized in working backwards is I need to figure out my packaged nitrogen situation. I have a decent amount of it coming by train right here. The rest is coming from out here. Alright, I now know where the nitrogen is going to plug into the train station. And then from there, I still need to figure out how I'm doing the load balancing and all that jazz. But let's follow this backwards. This is going to come from a little belt highway that is coming from this factory. The packaged nitrogen and then the empty canisters are just going to run two belts next to each other. They're going to come from underneath the factory here. Don't worry. The foundations are temporary. I'm going to delete it. Still need to decorate the place. But from here, they are going to come from right next to the iron node. We go up. And then here's some more belt. And then once they make it to here, we go all the way up to the nitrogen node. It is a pretty long belt, and I did think about maybe adding a train and trying to get it to go from here to the train station, but I thought that was just going to be way more hassle than it was worth. The belt is long, but it just works, so I kind of like that. And here we have a very similar setup as before. All of these are going to be overclocked, so they intake 300 nitrogen gas, because that's all that this one outputs. I've got 7 pure nitrogen nodes. So we've got 7 packagers here. So doing a 7-way split is pretty easy. The empty canisters are going to be coming from the train station. They're going to come along this belt. They first go into a merger, and then we go and do an 8-way split, but that 8th one comes out here and loops back into that very first merger. What would I do without that one last Mercer sphere? So I just need to figure out the pipes, so most likely I'll just kind of run them along the floor here, have them all pop up, and then each pipe will go to a different packager. I've got all my temporary sinks moved over here, so now they're nice and close, and everything is lined up the way it's supposed to be. So the first 3 are rubber, then we go plastic, copper sheets, and so on. Don't worry, these are all temporary. They're just coming from right over here. So some of them are coming from this bottom floor, and then some of them are coming from up here. This empty one right here is the empty canisters. For the empty canisters, this was still really easy. So I have 900 in total. I need 375 to go back to the train. And the other 475 are going to head off to that new one that I just made. So if we follow those this way, I am currently filling up just a ton of canisters. I moved a whole bunch of the empty canisters that I have, and I am just using the close one to fill up more storage units. So here's my thinking. I just need a big enough buffer, because if the buffer is big enough, then it can go into the factory, it'll get unpackaged, the empty canisters will make their way back to their nitrogen node, they'll get refilled, and as long as the buffer lasts long enough for them to start coming back, then this will work just fine. And I'm not really sure where that magic number is, so 3 storage containers may be a ton of overkill, or maybe it's just barely enough, or maybe I need to add a 4th one. I don't know, we'll find out. And here is my load balancer for the 525. For the train, each freight car is going to have 187.5, so I figured it was easiest to leave it like that. And then I can just add a merger right here. And then out of here, I'll have my 375, and that will merge up with the other one. And that is the last belt that I still need to figure out over here. But it is going to take a little while to fill up all of those storage containers, so I've got some time. And that takes care of pretty much all of the prep work. Now I need to run power throughout this whole thing, which means I'll need to figure out where to put an elevator. It's the easiest way to run power throughout a tower. And then I've got a couple things to decorate. I'm sure that won't take long at all, right? The save is currently at 646 hours and 25 minutes. I'll see you in just a couple of minutes. Welcome back to the final factory of the save, which is currently at 663 hours and 14 minutes. No, you're not crazy. It took me almost 17 hours to get to this point. Time flies when you're adding walls and windows. Just like with the rest of the tours, we start out here at the farthest part and we'll work our way back to the factory. So I dressed up the nitrogen node at least just a little bit. Mainly just some walls and some patterns, but hey, it's better than just the floating platform, right? The pipes all come up from the floor and then just feed into the different packagers. And on this side, to avoid having the wall go really far down or something, I just have those ones curve in. And just for it being a little outpost, I'm happy with it. I did decorate the steel factory, although that's not actually the next farthest part. That was a part that I just completely forgot about. Surprise, surprise, adding a whole little mini factory added on to that 17 hours. So this purple lift is coming from the pure SAM node up here. If we follow it back into the factory, it's just a really simple factory. So we've got the constructors that are turning the SAM into the reanimated SAM. The reanimated SAM then goes into the converter and gets turned into dark matter residue. And then both of the pipes of the dark matter residue get grouped up together, and I'm just turning it right into the dark matter crystals. I thought I was making enough in all of those other factories, but in fact I was 46 shy of what I actually needed. But thankfully I was pretty efficient with my SAM usage so far, so I could just do this, and I didn't have to make things even more complicated by using a different alternate recipe. So those 46 dark matter crystals just go right into our AI expansion server factory, and I just have that meeting up with the other exports for this factory. So there's already 240 dark matter crystals on this belt. We're just adding the 46 more. And then those go all the way to the front of the factory where the AI expansion servers will get split off and sunk, and then the rest of them will go on to the new factory. For the steel, this is where I kind of started playing around with less windows than I normally go with. I thought if I was making ballistic warp drives in this final factory, maybe it shouldn't look like a giant office building. Maybe it should have more concrete and just only a couple of windows. So really, nothing too fancy with the design. And on the inside, I decided to keep it pretty simple, and I just used a lot of the walkways to just kind of border the whole floor. Even though nothing changed about the factory, it was working at 100% before, and adding some walls doesn't change anything. It just feels so much better to have the walls and the windows. This side has the elevator, and also where the belt highway is going from here to the train station. So instead of trying to fit the curve, I decided to just leave the curve open, and then continue the rest of the belt highway. Sometimes the simple solutions are the best ones. I don't remember if I mentioned it, but I'm just using a belt balancer down here to get to the right number on each of the 3 belts. And all of the parts, except for the packaged nitrogen, are flowing into the factory. For the startup process, I am going to do my usual. I'm going to highlight all of the sinks and smart splitters and delete them all at once. Once I do that, then I will come back inside here and get the packaged nitrogen started. Since the stretch of belts here didn't have to be all that long, it made more sense to me to just put them all on display than having to stack them on top of each other. And this way I could use some lights that I almost never use, because in the past, these have probably been one of the biggest sources of performance issues. I just stopped using lights for a while because every once in a while I would have one in just the wrong spot, or I don't know what it was, but it could take my FPS from like 40 to like 2. It was just awful. But so far, I haven't noticed an issue with these ones. So even though I don't play at night much, it does look cool. And I almost forgot the water. So I did try to dress it up just a little bit. So I added some walls and then filled in some of the gaps with the rounded corner extensions. I like the way that it turned out. And then the pipes just head right into the factory, and most of them are just basically just running underneath the floor of that factory in the train station until they finally make their way over here. They just go out and around this section right here. And this section I probably never gonna even use, but there is an iron node right here, and I didn't want the train station to just cut right over it, because honestly it just looks funny when you have half of a node sticking out. And if I'm gonna cover it, I might as well just enclose that section and make it available in case I ever wanted to. It's the end of the game and I'm not gonna use it. I know I'm not gonna use it, but that was my thinking behind that. So the water pipes just come out here, and then I needed the nearby copper node, and here's the quartz node. Those will all feed into the factory on this side. The belts will plug in underneath and they go into the logistics area. The water then just flows up like it was before, but now it's got some pillars and support. And as for the main factory, as you can tell, I used a lot of concrete. These are all foundations, none of them are walls. And then with things like this right here, I just found a good spot, cut out the foundations, and then just went all the way around with pillars. And then used the beams to outline that. And because this thing is so huge and there's the different levels and whatnot, I felt like if I changed up the colors too much, like each of the different floors was a different color or something, it was just going to look like a mess. So it didn't look like a giant gray blob. I went around and outlined a whole bunch of the corners with just these white beams, and I think that really helped a lot. I really probably should have tried to add a little bit more highlight in here. I tried to use a little bit of red here and there, but I didn't want them to be too overpowering, so I ended up placing a lot of these kind of things in spots where they're not super visible, and they're only kind of highlights where they are. So it definitely ended up not being overpowering. I think I could have used a little bit more color so it wasn't just so gray. Besides the lack of color, I am really happy with the way that it turned out. I really like the different sizes of the floors. This is something that I really probably should have tried to embrace more since I made so many towers in this save. I should have just made more fun looking ones like this. Because I didn't want all of these walls to be completely flat and I didn't want to add too many windows. I made this blueprint to help spice up the walls. So if I lock it in place against one of the foundations, I just nudge it back 2 meters and that'll set it into the wall so you don't see the outside part. But this is just a big pillar support with a large fan and 4 of the square 2-meter signs to add that light right behind the fan. So for right now, I just have this ground entrance. I should probably add my hypertubes that I normally do. That'll take me out here, but I haven't quite done that yet. So we can go down here, and here is the logistics floor. I went through and added just a ton of the conveyor throughput monitors throughout the factory. So pretty much after each one of these mergers or splitters or whatever it is, where I have an amount on a display sign, I then put a throughput monitor. Because those two things together are a huge help of finding issues. From right outside the logistics floor, we can take our elevator. The elevator is on the outside, but then the entrance will be right to the inside. And this is pretty much what each of the floors look like. I have glass foundations as a walkway about 4 foundations high on each of these floors because I'm pretty sure I made every floor the same. I think from floor to ceiling, each of these should be 8. Yeah. So each floor is 8 foundations tall. But no matter which machine, because I'm not dealing with particle accelerators, is going to have plenty of space. And by doing that, it gave me plenty of headroom so I could add some lights and it wouldn't look too crowded. Got a nice view of all of the lifts and everything going from floor to floor. And then most of the floors just have a couple windows, but not too much. And I'm happy with the way this came out. With the floors being so tall, that means you get a really nice elevated look at everything, which is definitely one of my favorite parts about this game. Just watching the factory work. And it may be a little bit hard to see, but I figured it would be good to have a set of stairs or ramps or whatever. So in the back corner on each floor is a way to get to the actual factory floor. But the idea is you can just be up here and be able to just supervise. This should all just work, right? Most of these floors are going to look very similar as far as that kind of decor. But the top floor is the only one that has a permanent sink. So I figured the easiest thing to do, because I only need 200 of these, is just send it straight into the dimensional depot. At 40 a minute, this is going to fill up ridiculously quick, and then the overflow is just going to head on over to the sink. And of course I saved it to last, but these are going to make an insane amount of sync points. Just for a reference, before we turn this on, so this is syncing just all of the parts to make this factory and everything else in my world. Looks like I'm peaking at 40. 35 to 40. That's my range. So we'll have to remember that, and we'll take a look when we get this thing up and running. And once it gets up and running, I think I can wait around for just a couple more minutes to see what the sync points jump up to. Now I'm going to head back down to the bottom floor and get everything highlighted. We can see how long it takes to get this whole thing up and running. Step 1, select all the smart splitters and sinks. Everything selected on this side, let's go select the last 2 over here. And just enough dismantle slots. It won't be the fastest factory. Let's go ahead and start that stopwatch now. Step 2 is turning on the limestone. And Step 3, send in the packaged nitrogen. To make sure the aluminum didn't back up too much, because it was going to show up before the copper did, I have these smart splitters set up, but now I can just kind of clear out a little bit of the excess and delete them. I need to wait for the modular frames to show up on this belt before I can get the heavy modular frames and then the fused modular frames started. So while I wait for those, I'm going to go ahead and jump up to the next floor and then we'll come back down. Because I didn't want the nitrogen gas to back up and cause any issues with my load balancers, I just have all of the excess going into a storage container, which I will just move once I delete this and back over to its normal storage place underneath the train station. But I did put a whole stack in here so that I could at least pre-fill the pipes. Once the heavy modular frames make it into the blenders, then I can send in the aluminum casings. I was just waiting on the 45 modular engines, and it looks like we're reading all the numbers we're supposed to. I've just been syncing everything until everything showed up. Now we can send it all in. Man, these things look cool. Alright, and just like that, we're up to 40 per minute. And I'm already up to 75, so oh, that's beautiful right there. The dimensional depot is full, and here they come. Down to pretty much 20 even, so the parts for this used up a decent amount. Well, that's a nice jump. Ooh, that's what I'm talking about. Going from 20 million to 127 million in no time. And it keeps going even higher. Doubt it's gonna go much higher than 138 million though. Alright, well I guess we're gonna fluctuate a little bit. That is 40 Ballistic Warp Drives automated. Ah, that feels good. With the dimensional depot full, I think it's time to head back home. Ah, home sweet home. I do love the portals. Just made a quick stop over at the electronics factory that's making the biochemical sculptors. Now I can take the elevator down to the bottom floor, where the space elevator is. That's right, who wants to walk when I've got hypertubes? Been a while since I've been out here. The very first space elevator part to finish. Can't forget my ballistic warp drives. One last time. It's fun to just spam 1, 2, 3 a whole bunch of times until it's all loaded. And there we go. I think the abrupt music stop means it's time to pull that lever. Let's send it. Obviously, we should check oil. These are some great animations. I'm loving this. One last lever pull. For all the kittens and puppies. Fantastic. What an ending. I must confess, this isn't the first time seeing it. It took me way too long not to spoil it for myself already. I think it's great because I've seen a number of different reactions and takeaways from the whole story. I'm really happy to hear that we'll be getting some more story at some point. Because this video is already pretty long, I'll wait until my world tour wrap up to share my thoughts. Thank you all so much for your patience on this one, and thank you for being here. And a special thank you to everyone that likes, comments, and hypes the videos. It is very much appreciated. I have finally beat the game. Now I'm gonna go around and clean up the world before I share the save. I'll let some more coupons build up while I do it. Then I'll see how many trophies I can buy. And I guess I'll need somewhere to put them all. So look forward to that. And thanks for watching.